Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Hello there, everybody. This is Guineith Isaac speaking, filling in for Vincent Finelli. He has stuff going on this week around about the place. He asked me to fill in for him because he was, he had things going on. So here I am. And I'm on air today. If you want to call in, then the number is 866-582-9933. We'd love to take your call. Nathan is engineering the broadcast, and our guest today is Rick Scheben. Are you there, Rick? Hello, Rick.
Hear me?
Hello, Rick.
Hello?
How are you? Hello. Are you there, Rick?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine. I have absolutely no idea what you want to talk about today. This is a quite short notice. So I'll let you take the lead, and you begin talking about whatever it is that you had lined up for today. For the talk.
Well, let me give you a little background myself, Guineith, and then I'll tell you what Vince and I were going to speak about. And that is, I wrote a book on the financial, economic, social, and political reasons why we need to be more self-sufficient as American people or Australian people.
Yes.
I live off-grid, and basically going back to nature, living below your means, knowing the fine line between needs and wants. But I do a lot of reading on financial and economic issues and the psyops behind it. And one of the things that we were going to talk about today is basically the elite template or blueprint, playbook, however you want to, or flow chart, however you want to describe it, for the destruction of the Western world and especially America. And one of the things. Yeah, so one of the things, I want to qualify and put in context of this flow chart and make people be aware that the MO of the elite is to distract, dumb down, and divide the American people by groups. Every group possible: race, gender, sex, religion, ideology, generation, philosophy, you name it, because they do not want synergy. And that's why half the time we hear race-baiting, sex-baiting, gender-baiting questions from the mainstream media. And, of course, the mainstream media's job is to manufacture perception, pity, guilt, and ideology. And that's why there's only 5 companies that control 95% of the information that's out there. And it's not just TV, radio, magazine, and newspapers that are owned by these elitists, but it's production companies and publishing companies as well. For example, I get many offers to do reality shows and documentaries on off-grid living and things, but it's all scripted. And I told them...
And they want to make you look bad.
Well,
absolutely. They want to make you seem to be the kook.
Absolutely. Because they want to teach our generations coming up, Guineith, about how to push buttons, manage paper, and be politically correct. They want to cultivate followers and not thinkers.
Yeah.
So this PC playbook, how I defy it, is basically standing for principle, and that is having the same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody on American soil, saying the truth and be willing to have the guts to be hated for it. And if somebody does something and has less consequences for their behaviors because of what group they're from, that means we should all do it. And group identity politics is really their home run pitch. And they use Hegelian dialectic, professional wordsmithing, media propaganda. In other words, we've been force-fed a sandwich from Marxist, Alinsky, Frankfurt School, Clowder and Piven, Communist Manifesto, and we're so drunk on the Kool-Aid.
And a big dose of Machiavelli in there, too.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Yep.
So when you have a special tiered system of different rules, laws, and accountabilities based on what group you're in, what it does is lower the bars of standards and expectations. So you're insulting the work ethic, the ability, and the intelligence of every person that's shoved into this group, which degrades and disrespects the people. And there's no chance of synergy. So when the elite says your group can't compete, your group's work is suboptimal, you don't empower a nation by lowering the bars of standards and expectations. You basically degrade it, and especially the people in those particular groups. And if you say anything, their job is to make you submissive and break your will. And that's why they have politically correct buzzwords that's been hijacked by definition, like racist, bigot, sexist, misogynist, homophobe, intolerant, violent, hater, with an anti in front of any word and an isn't-ist or phobia in the back of any word. And that's why we need to stand up to this, because they go after the individual when they can't win, and they demonize, they discredit, they delegitimize the individual. And that's why the mainstream media loves satire and banter, because they can't have honest intellectual discussions.
Conversation.
Exactly.
They automatically begin to lose as soon as we put in reasoned arguments. And if you wanted to take it back to a kid level, okay, there's this movie out there which was made after a video game called Angry Birds. And the main character is a fellow called Redbird, and he has to go into anger management therapy because he's angry. But the thing is, he gets doubly angry when the piggies show up and start wanting to steal all the eggs. And what he says is, you're not asking basic questions. Everybody's going all the politically correct, we should accept the piggies, they don't really want to do us harm, we have to be hospitable to the piggies, and in reality, the pigs want to take their children away, which are their eggs, of course, because they're birds. And he says, well, you're not asking basic questions. Why are these people here? How many of them are there? And, when are they going away? I heard that. That was more or less a direct quote from the movie. If anyone wants to have 90 minutes of mindless entertainment, they should go on to their favourite movie download site and download Netflix or whatever of Angry Birds. Watch it with grown-up eyes and look at the signals that it's putting out. Because, something, one of their rules is that they have to show you everything that they're going to do before they do it, and you have to consent to it. I don't know if you'd heard that one, but apparently on some Masonic level that they've all sworn an oath to show us exactly what they're going to do before they do it, and that we have to actually consent to all this stuff happening. And mostly they define our consent by our lack of protest against whatever it is they want to do. In other words, if we don't object, then they're going to go ahead with their plans. But as soon as we object and begin to make a fuss, they have to shelve that plan, at least for the moment, and maybe come at it again a generation or a few years later.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. And that's why we say silence equals consent. And that's why we all need to research, read, share information, grab a microphone, however you decide to do it. Because when we lower the bars of standards and expectations, whether it be Australia or America or any Western country, you're destroying the country because you reward mediocrity based on these politically correct buzzwords like equality, fairness, tolerance, diversity, prosperity, inclusiveness. And I'll be honest with you, when you really look at the numbers, Guineith, there's no prosperity for the bottom 93%. In fact, the middle class is losing a ton of ground. It's all Hegelian dialectic and political correct wordsmithing. And so when you destroy Western countries by rewarding mediocrity for decade after decade after decade. Ingenuity, productivity, and innovation has been thrown out the window with the baby in the bathwater. In other words, the only people who can benefit from the ingenuity, the productivity, and the innovation are the elites who have the capital resources, who have the connections, who have basically paid off the system from the top down through corruption and manipulation, and that's what we have.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree there. And, in Australia, I'll tell you how it works. If you are on a government payment and you want to get off that government payment and actually make an independent living for yourself, I know this because I went through this a few years ago. You have a net loss in that year that you go off the government payment of around about 20%, okay? Which means that you have about 20% lower income in that year. No matter how much money you bring in that year, you will be 20% worse off in the year that you go off the government payment. And that is absolutely remarkable. And when I went to my local church and announced that I was going off the dole, I didn't want to be on any government payments anymore. I'm still on the family tax benefit, which is the check that practically every family in Australia receives to help to support the upbringing of their children. Okay? And this was the payment that was announced worldwide that they were going to require vaccines for the children. Now, if the government wants to compel me to vaccinate my children, I'm going to make them sign liability for any medical and health problems that my children have. I've already told the school this when they tried to pull this one on me. That my sons attend, that they have two male cousins and both of them are severely autistic. And one of their male cousins is the most severely autistic child in the state. And although he's now in his mid-20s, he lives in a psychiatric ward in isolation in an unfurnished room because as soon as any furniture gets put in his room, he smashes it. This is Guineith speaking, filling in for Vincent Finale, Guineith Isaacs. Hello, this is Guineith Isaacs speaking, filling in for Vincent Finale. I have with us on air today Rick Scheben, and we were discussing government payments and how they want to keep everybody enslaved into their system. And a major way that they do that is by dividing and conquering and by keeping everybody dependent on the state. And that will ultimately, in America, do what they've been doing in Australia, which is using the government payments as a lever of fear to get people to do stuff like vaccinate their children, when we all know that the vaccines contain aluminium, mercury, cancer cell lines, aborted baby parts, yada, 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 yada. Yeah, Rick, that's where we left off, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I know you're filling in for Vince in the last minute, Gwyneth. We were going to talk about fascism, and we talked about that last week, because that's what fascism really is. When you talk about government dole, the big fascist corporate oligarchies that have created an alliance with big government that's protected by the mainstream media and the court system, like today's attorneys and judges, that's what fascism really is. And let me just mention a couple of examples. The big, like Bezos from Amazon, he gets $1.48 from taxpayer money for each box that's shipped. Nestle went to California a few years ago for a $500 permit, stole 27 million gallons of water from California when local farmers couldn't even legally punch in a well, and they had to let their farms literally die off. See, this is what fascism is. Yeah, and people need to realize that Yeah, that the whole definition is being changed. We're in the book-burning era of the Western world. For example, the post-2009 definition for fascism is something like this: right-wing ideology or a movement that's fundamentally opposed to democracy and liberalism. First of all, folks, people need to realize that liberalism has been hijacked by the globalists. It's not liberal anymore, okay? They're using this as the guise. The correct definition, which is pre-2009, is a system of government marked by totalitarian dictatorships for social and economic control and the suppression of opposition by the system and suppression of opportunity. And that's where the big corporate oligarchies and big government has created an alliance, and they're in bed together. And that's why they love high regulations. They love high minimum wage laws. They love lobbying, because the small and medium-sized businesses can no longer compete with that. So we need to realize that everything is being changed from the top down, and opportunities for everybody is being thrown out the window. And this is why one of the reasons, many reasons, that I live off-grid and make my own electricity, try to harvest my own food, from produce to meat and everything in between, because we can't control our own destiny. The bottom line is there is a looting. We're in the looting stage of corporate America by big government, the MSM, and the court systems, and it's all against the bottom 93%. There's a coup against the bottom 93% of people to govern themselves. Guineith?
Yep, I like Mussolini's definition of fascism. It's the merger of state and corporate power.
There you go.
And he ought to know. One of the most famous self-defined fascists of the 20th century. He called himself a fascist. And when people said to him in press releases, and what does that mean to be a fascist? Because the Italians actually really, really liked Mussolini. They thought he was great. He said, it's very simple. It's the merger of state and corporate power. And do you know what it ultimately boils down to? It's rule by the mafia. That's ultimately where it goes. And that suited the Italians just fine, because that's how they've been living forever. But it doesn't suit the rest of us at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I thought I heard the break music. Are we heading into a break there?
It sounds like we are, Guineith, and I will address what you said after the break.
I have on the air with us Rick Scheben, and we were just about to get into a discussion about fascism.
All right. Are you ready for me to address what you said, Guineith?
I'm ready.
Awesome.
Fire away.
Hey, I'm just curious. Are you calling from Australia right now?
I'm calling from Australia. I live in country, but it's probably just after 12:30 at night.
Oh, my. So you're drinking beer and I'm drinking coffee. Very cool.
I'm having a cup of tea.
Okay.
Is what I'm doing. Mostly, grog is out of the question, simply because, for one thing, I'm a single mum, and I'm a widow, and I've got so much going on in my life. I think probably if we were in a very financial state, one stout a day would go down really nicely. But there's other things that take a higher priority in my life rather than spending my money on alcohol.
Well
said.
Yeah.
Yep, that's just how it is.
Well said. And I think I was tongue-in-cheek there, but I want to say before...
Yeah, no, that's fine.
I want to say I'm sorry for your loss. And, it's time to stop for no person, so we got to keep moving forward, absolutely.
That's right. Well, my husband died when my younger son was 3 months old, and he's now 14 years old.
Oh.
And it has been non-stop battles the whole way with state-run pedophile cartels. That means the Child Protective Services.
Mm-hmm.
and it is also non-state run but state-protected pedophile cartels, meaning the creepy people across the way who want to kidnap your kids on the way to school.
Yeah, it's really sad.
We had, when I was living in Geraldton in Western Australia, we had 6 abduction attempts in 4 years on my boys. That's pretty well the reason why we are no longer living in Geraldton, Western Australia, despite the fact that my whole family comes from there. And we have, or my mother's side of the family anyway, I've got a lot of my dad's family in Perth, but you know, when we have a family get-together in Geraldton, the family has to hire out the local Returned Services League hall. I suppose they have a Veterans Affairs League or something like that in the United States, where you know, returned veterans can get together and have a social time and have some beers, reminisce about the war, and maybe get their rights represented.
Yep.
I think that there must be something like that somewhere in the United States.
Well, there are, and President Trump is doing a lot of things for the veterans, which has been totally ignored by the last few administrations. And I'll be honest with you, we need to start if we don't take care of our veterans, our young and our old, then every ounce of humanitarianism has left that particular country. And he's doing a lot of good things. He's doing some things I don't agree with, but all in all, he's trying hard. He's working hard. The man is taking $1 as a salary. He's putting his life and his family's life and safety on the line for this country. He's a multi-billionaire. He doesn't need to be doing this, but he's trying. And we got to give credit where credit is due. And he might be our last shot. So I want to address what you just said, Guineith, regarding when we started talking about fascism. You mentioned Mussolini, and whether it be black shirts, brown shirts, mercenaries, whatever you want to use, Mussolini, Hitler, Mao, Pol Pot, you know, the bottom line is there was over 100 million people killed from this behavior. And when you talk about, I'm going to lump everything together. When you talk about communism, socialism, authoritarianism, dictatorships, totalitarianism, it doesn't matter what the semantic, politically correct term you use. It's all top-down, centralized control from a non-governing, non-elected, usually government. And even if it is elected, it's already, the fix was in, and they're all part of the same system. And when I was talking about, yeah, absolutely. So to talk about fascism and to see big government and big corporate oligarchies getting away with what they are, and I mentioned earlier about the looting stage of corporate America, which is protected by, again, big government, the MSM and the court systems. What we have, and I'll just give you an example. So I do a lot of reading on economics because the PSYOP is so interesting to me, because half of what I read is people are trying to sway public opinion, trying to make you think a certain way that the economy's doing great. And I'm reading stuff where even the last quarter of 2016 was negative GDP. So according to what I'm reading, we are in a recession already, probably heading towards the worst depression America's ever seen. And we have CEOs and CFOs basically using 0% loans or very low percent loans to buy back stocks. They're giving themselves huge bonuses, and they're paying off dividends with that money. They're not reinvesting the money into the company, so they're eliminating the core business model to make everything look good on paper, and I'm doing air quotes here as I say that. So they issue bonds, in other words, they're selling debts. They're saying the credit rating for these bonds are great, like AAA, but they're bundling bad debt and toxic assets with AAA government bonds. And a lot of them are bundled with junk bonds. And then they sell to the public, especially desperate pension funds that are looking for yields, and all earnings are adjusted. Again, I'm doing air quotes. Adjusted,
yep.
Okay? And that's what, and this is protected by fascism. It's like the SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission, protects the fraudsters. It's analogous. I was in the pharmaceutical industry for over 20 years. The FDA and the AMA is owned by Big Pharma. And they create laws like Dodd-Frank, which is supposed to stop these credit rating plays, but the SEC allows it. It's supposed to protect the little guy and the little banks, but instead they've gone basically the exceptions, the dodging, the exemptions, the lobbying, the low regulations is only for the big guys and the big banks. So the results for the American people or the Western world is low wages, less good jobs, low small business growth. And when you don't have small business growth to compete against these corporate oligarchies and these monopolies who are literally, and Amazon, I read about it all the time, and Bezos, I mean, defying antitrust laws every hour of the day, there's no chance of an expanding economy. And that's what we're in right now. And these are all examples of fascism. You know, it's just like, I don't know if you read about the Merck CEO who just resigned from Trump's manufacturing council. I read about that this morning. He talks about hatred and bigotry and group supremacy from from what happened in Virginia with the riots the other day. Well, they don't talk about Antifa. They don't talk about Black Lives Matter, which are funded by the George Soros.
Well, they're funded by George Soros.
Exactly, and yes.
You know, when I have a degree in environmental science from the University of Melbourne, which is one of the best universities in Australia. Okay, what I had to study international politics and management. Okay, I had to study global trade systems. Environmental science, some people might see it as a soft degree. It's not. You have to study everything. You have to know about international politics, trade, treaties, international law. You have to know about the deepest skullduggery of international business, because it all goes back to affecting the natural environment. Okay, and what happens is these corporations rape the environment, and then they get a slap on the wrist. But George Soros, back in the day when I was studying, he was in the middle of raping the Malaysian economy. What he did was he bought up pretty well, I think probably something like a third of the Malaysian currency that they had, and within 48 hours he dumped the whole lot onto the international foreign exchange markets, and he deliberately killed the Malaysian economy. And overnight they went from having a first-class standard of living to a third world nation status overnight. This man is evil and he's dangerous.
Absolutely, and it's not just George Soros. It's all. We have 8 people in the world. 8. Last year the number was 64. Now it's 8 people own a higher net worth than half of the globe. In other words, planet Earth combined. I mean, we cannot have humanitarian, we cannot have a capitalistic system, we cannot have commerce or an economy until we arrest globalists, especially these NGOs, and put them on trial for sedition, treason, espionage, and they need to be punished. And what I would love to see President Trump do is get rid of his whole cabinet and replace them with average Joe people. These gazillionaires that he's putting in there, they're part of the special interest, and they've been bought and paid for it to have the money that they have. And one of the things I talk about on the air on many different shows with is practice what you preach laws. And let me just give you an example what that is. I don't know if you've ever heard me say this on the air, but for example, you can't keep saying hypocrisy.
I have Rick Scheben with us, and we were discussing all the things that are wrong with fascism. And I just want to say, Rick, I grew up in a left-wing household. But there used to be on this earth a type of left-wing guy who basically he was involved in the trade union movement. He was often actually a Christian, and he was somebody who basically wanted to crush the power of the corporatocracy and, make sure that the working guy got his fair share. And that was the sort of guy that my dad was. Okay? He came from a British blue blood banking family that had been cut off from the main part of the family tree, probably around about the mid-1870s, and that was, incidentally, the Bonham Carters. And that is my family. And, the things that they did in their past were truly evil. But I believe that type of socialist now is pretty well extinct. Do you have any comment there?
Well, absolutely. Now we have a rigging of the game, okay? There isn't real economics. There isn't real markets or fundamentals. Look at PS ratios, PE ratios. I mean, every book is cooked. And you look at demographics with the baby boomers retiring and so many good jobs have left the Western world to go to low-cost producing countries. You look at central bank corrupt monetary policies, Keynesian economics, which if I had to define it real quick, it's elite interventionism. It's to keep the status quo. In other words, what I call an incognito caste system. And of course, group identity politics. We have a whole different system right now, and that's part of the fascist top-down centralized control with no accountability from the very top. And this is why we need to have all of us average Joes talking about the rise of political correctness and the fall of the middle class and the inequalities that's occurring. But now we're at the point where the system is so false and phony that there's the left-right paradigm. Only the low-information voter really thinks is a true left-right paradigm. That's maybe 5% of it. It's the aristocracy versus the serfs. And people need to realize that every group, if you don't identify as an American or an Australian or whatever country you're from, and you identify from what group you come from, whether it be victim group status or protection group status, you're destroying your nation because we have to be Americans first. Remember when we talked about lowering the bars of standards and expectations? You destroy America from within because you're rewarding mediocrity, and then ingenuity, productivity, innovation, knowledge, everything that made our countries great has been thrown out the window with the baby in the bathwater. So we have to address options for the people. And one of the things I was going to talk about, practice what you preach laws before the last break. How many times do you hear about the big corporate oligarchies and big government being proponents of Common Core education, yet they send their kids to private schools? How many times do you hear about, we need to get rid of the guns, but yet these same big wigs who are saying this are hiring security to carry guns to protect them, or they're living behind some wall with security who have guns.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. We're delighted to have you in class today. Patrick is engineering the broadcast at GCN in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli, and we're broadcasting live from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. This hour, I'm delighted to be broadcasting with a dear friend, Andy Gibbs, ANDYGIBBS.com, AndyGibbs.com. And we're going to talk a little bit about history. We're going to be talking about surviving a startup company. And class, you might remember that I did 7 one-hour broadcasts on extreme tax deductions. Okay? And the reason I'm telling you this is the kind of thing that I do. I've known Andy for Oh, geez. Almost 4 decades. Just under 4 decades. And we've got a lot of time together. And we're going to talk about some of that time and what it's like starting a company in Silicon Valley. Welcome, Andy Gibbs.
Thank you, Vincent. I'm glad to be here.
Andy, it's so good to hear your voice. And I've been thinking all morning and yesterday about some of the good times we've had and some of the fun things we've done and some of the trials and tribulations that we've been through trying to start companies. And it is the way I look at it, Andy, if it's like climbing a ladder, and if you've got a great idea and you think that you can take this idea to market, while you're doing that, while you're climbing that ladder, there are guys with saws sawing off the legs of the ladder. There are other guys, climbing up, reaching to pull you off the ladder. There are other guys trying to knock the ladder over. And it's a precarious position to be in, and it's daunting, it's challenging, and it's fun all at the same time, and a little terrifying. And so you've got people trying to steal your ideas. You've got people who are trying to prevent your ideas from coming to market. Have I exaggerated that, Andy, at all?
No, actually, I think you've understated that. Because I believe that there are generally, from my business perspective, 2 kinds of people in the world: the creators and the takers. That's it. There are those that create things, and there are those that can't create, and the only way they can move forward is by taking. And those are the sharks that look for every opportunity to exploit the creators. And very often the creators are left behind. The takers take, move on, and keep going. So you're absolutely right. Not only do they want to destroy or take an idea, but any opportunity they have, even under the guise of friendship, to help you move your program forward, it's all self-serving, and they have a master plan design to take. At the end of the day, they will take. And I've been through it a couple of times. And yes, it's disheartening, but it's important to understand the visceral, primal nature of humans when you start out any kind of a business. And surviving in business is no different from surviving in the wilderness.
I was thinking about a story you were telling me and our other partner, Bert, back in California when we did a startup company. And there was and I don't want to mention this guy's full name, but his first name is Bob. And so you were the guy who was going to meet with this guy, Bob, who was the CEO of a corporation. And they were interested in buying, or at least they said they were interested in buying a lot of our satellite receivers. And so you drove down in your vehicle to meet Bob, and you found his office. It was a little strange because his desk sat on a raised platform, and he welcomed you into his office, and you can flesh out the details if you'd like. But the thrust of this story is that this was a negotiation session with you and the CEO, Bob, and you were the chief operations officer and also the chief engineer for our company. And so you were going to negotiate with this guy, Bob, about the pricing and the terms and conditions of this deal where they would be buying our satellite communications receivers. And so Bob tells you can sit down on this chair in front of his desk. He goes behind his desk, but his desk is on a raised platform.
Yeah.
Andy, do you want to share with what you did to make the score a little more even? Or do you want me to tell it?
Go ahead.
Okay. Andy, what you did was he had these armchairs. And so instead of sitting on the seat of the armchair, you sat on the arm of the armchair to make you equal in height to him on his raised platform. And I'm pretty darn certain that he has never experienced anyone who was willing to challenge his perceived
Dominant
authority of him.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The intimidation.
So how did that work out?
We walked away with no deal. He couldn't control, and if it wasn't a win-lose situation, he wasn't interested. And of course, I wasn't interested in a lose-win situation either. So, a waste of time and a lesson learned. That was a cheap lesson. Some lessons aren't quite so cheap.
Yeah. Would you like to share some other thoughts?
Yeah. And I had another startup in the early 90s, and without going into a lot of the details, it was manufacturing products for the auto industry. And within 6 months, we just, beyond our wildest dreams, received a contract from one of the big automakers. Tier 1 supplier, approved within 6 months of starting the company. And every time the company would call, I would just shake in my boot. They doubled the order. And that may sound good, but cash flow determines survival. And every time they doubled the order, we doubled our order to our vendors. We had to pay them in 45. The auto company paid us in 90 days, which means we were financing the increased production, and every order meant we needed to go find more money. And we ran out of sources of money. We had to sell the company. And we sold it to another auto supplier for what was a pretty good deal, money-wise. Well, 3 years into the program, 2 years into the program, the company was supposed to write the annual check that was agreed to based on the increased sales. And I can tell you that the check was in the high six figures, right next to the seven-figure mark. And the company said, it's cheaper to sue him than to pay him. So they sued me for fraud. That happened 4 years earlier when I had a little company of 12 people, and I defrauded this big company by hiding paperwork. It was bogus. 10 years in federal court, traveling from California to Michigan to litigate this. And at the end of the day, the jury was crying. They asked the judge to put back in the fraud claims, the racketeering claims that we brought on countersuit. The judge told them to sit down. They awarded us everything that would have been awarded or earned under the contract, but it took 10 years of litigation. I lost the house in the process and 10 years of negativity just to prove a point. And it was a hard lesson, and a very hard 10 years that probably took 20 years off my life. And these are things that go on behind the scenes every day. And it's easy to find them in hindsight, but the important survival tactic is to try to absorb these experiences of everyone else, apply them to you with insight so that you can go into starting small businesses or starting any kind of a relationship with an understanding of what it takes to not only survive, but thrive. You don't just want to survive. You want to thrive without damaging other people. I mean, you have to respect other people. So understanding that there are takers and creators. I'm a born creator, and my antenna are always up for the takers.
Yeah, and we've seen some of those takers. We have seen, well, when we had our company in California, one day one of the co-founders of the corporation, the president, got a call from the owner of the building. Well, I'll talk a little bit more about that when we come back.
Yeah,
but what happened with the alarm company?
Pretty dramatic. Yeah.
Pretty dramatic. Yeah, we'll talk about that when we come back. Andy Gibbs is with us. AndyGibbs.com. And what we're doing is we're rolling up our sleeves and showing you the bruises. We'll be right back. AndyGibbs.com, AndyGibbs.com. So Andy and I and Bert started this company in California, and we were manufacturing satellite receivers. Andy was our chief mechanical engineer and chief operating officer. I was the chief financial officer, and Bert was the CEO. And you've heard Bert Bertonis on the air with us. And so we had this rented space. This is back in the 1980s. We rented this space in a really nice building. But our space was in the storage space above the front offices. So we were in the warehouse section. And so if cars or trucks were coming into this warehouse, you'd hear the horns blaring. You'd hear the roar of the diesel engines. And so we were in this space above the unheated space, above the front offices. And we'd have access to the conference room downstairs if we needed it for any particular reason, like a meeting with clients and customers and so forth. And the secretary was kind enough to answer our telephone and let us know if we had calls coming in. And so one evening or night, the alarm went off. And the owner of the building got a call from the alarm company. And the discussion was, well, the alarm went off, and the owner of the company said, well, geez, that darn thing. That's probably okay. Don't worry about it. I'll check it out in the morning. Well, what happened was when we came in the morning, we didn't know about the alarm going off. We came in the following morning, and nothing was taken. However, our engineering filing cabinet, our drawing filing cabinet with all of Andy's mechanical drawings and the circuit diagrams and schematics, they were open. The copy machine was used. And what happened was what I would call industrial espionage. Would you agree with that, Andy?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to tell the rest of the story, or do you want me to do it?
Go ahead. I'm following you.
All right. So we thought, well, this is pretty strange, but we couldn't prove anything because nothing was taken. But the drawers were open. We weren't like that. We were very careful with our engineering drawings because that was the corporate jewels. We were an innovator. We had one of the finest designs in satellite communication receiver technology. We had applied for patents. So we were a real innovative company. Well, it seemed like everything was okay until we went to the next trade show. And what we were building was the most sophisticated satellite receiver on the market. Now, we had built the lowest cost entry in the market, and that was being sold all over the world. Yes.
And that's another story about telling competitors that we're lowering the cost. But we'll come back to that one.
Yeah, that was, okay. So we had the absolute most innovative satellite communications receiver in the market. It had more bells, more whistles, more features. And Andy, you were working with, I believe, General Electric's plastics division to get the front panel, and we had this translucent front panel with LED technology that was it was unheard of, the kind of things that we were doing. And it was really, really handsome. It was unlike anything else on the market. And then we so we were building this thing, and we built them. We had models for sale at $1,495, which is a lot of money, but back then it was a great value. Well, we ended up at the convention, and you saw our exact receiver in a competitor's booth, high on a shelf behind those ropes that keep you away from getting close. They had an identical version. I'm talking bells, whistles, buttons, everything was identical. It was like someone went into our booth, brought one of our receivers, which we hadn't even sold a single one. We were unveiling it at this particular convention. This was the unveiling of our latest, newest design. Okay? We hadn't shipped a single one. No one had one. No one could copy it because no one except us We were the only ones that had them. But this guy, in another booth, one of our competitors, had the exact same receiver. And if you took a micrometer out, wouldn't it measure up identically to ours, Andy? Wouldn't it?
Identically. It was the lump in the throat that we all experienced when we saw that our creation had literally been ripped off. Then we made the connection back to having the drawing drawers open.
Right. Yep. This is all true, class. Yeah. This is what it's like. ANDYGIBBS.com. So, Andy, when we were at this convention with our latest satellite communications receiver, the most sophisticated in the market, by far, I mean, leaps ahead of everybody else in every way you can look at it.
This was the iPhone in a flip phone world. Absolutely. This was a game changer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so what you did was Bert and I were at our convention booth, and you were walking around looking at what else was available and what was being shown by other exhibitors there, and you saw our receiver. But it was a knockoff, and what you saw was LEDs lit up in the receiver, but no electronics. Now at our booth, which was maybe a couple aisles over from this particular exhibit, we had a working model. They were boxed up. If you wanted to buy one and take one home, if you wanted to buy it and test it and make sure everything was what you thought it was for the one that you wanted to buy, we could do that too. I mean, we had working for sale inventory right there at the convention. Okay, but this other guy representing this other company had our receiver knocked off, and we tied right then and there. As you said, we figured out that that's what happened with the alarm going off. They copied they stole our design, and we were selling our receiver at $14.95. You could buy it and take it home. And they were selling a knockoff, a non-working receiver with no electronics in it that worked. Nothing other than a battery and powering the LED so it looked like it worked. But you couldn't touch it. You couldn't turn the knobs because it was out of reach. It was behind those ropes. And they were selling them at around $700. And class, here's what happened to our company. We got killed right then and there. We got killed because customers who would buy one from us and take it home complete with working electronics were willing to save half by paying in advance to this other company who didn't have a receiver that worked. They didn't have one that worked. They weren't even close to getting one. And they would say that, you pay now, and in 6 weeks we'll get you your receiver. They were willing to do that, and that shut us down. It killed us because we put everything we had into a real product in a real marketplace above board, and these other guys were thieves. Is that it in a nutshell?
That is. And, as we are teaching today, there are creators and takers. We were creating something, and there's always somebody out there to take it. But taking, that story is an overt taking. But then there's the covert taking. It's, we will help you succeed if you want to play the game. And we have, stories of having to play the game. And clearly, Vincent, you had a conversation with a small group of people that invited us into an exclusive little club at the cost of $25,000. And you, Bert, and I had maxed out our credit cards. We were building this company on fumes. And we thought, where are we going to come up with $25,000? And it's probably not worth it anyway. In retrospect, it would have been worth it because this little exclusive club boomed into $1 billion business. And I think you remember that story quite well.
I do. And there was a You and Bert and I were at a convention, not the convention with our most sophisticated receiver, but earlier than that, a couple years earlier.
Earlier than that, right.
Yeah, and in the 1980s, but very, very, very early in the 1980s, and around 1980, and we were in Washington D.C. at a satellite communications convention, and there a senator, a U.S. senator, came up to us, dressed to the nines, and he was very interested in our little company, and we were a bunch of 20-something-year-olds, okay, and a U.S. senator came over, and I was shocked. I spent a lot of time looking at our technology. I was very interested in our technology. I thought, why is a government guy interested in our little company? Yeah, we've got some really cool technology, but I don't get it. What do these government guys know anyway? Well, Andy, it took me up until a couple years ago to figure it out. I can't believe it. From 1980, I'm really slow, but I figured it out. And I even mentioned this on the air. And here's what happened. So this U.S. senator wanted to form an organization, a lobby group, and this lobby group would be directly connected to the Washington D.C. inside players. And for $25,000, we could be a basic member of this. Now, if you really wanted to, be a more elevated member of this exclusive club, you could spend, more like $50,000 or more, or maybe $100,000. We didn't have. Andy, those were the days when we would have a packet of ketchup and we put it in hot water and stir it around. That'd be tomato soup. Okay.
Yes.
That's what we're talking about. We had no money. We didn't make any money on our company. In terms of salary, we put everything back into the company. Everything we had, and we were living on fumes. All three of us. Anyway, this guy wanted us to join this exclusive club, and I was against it. I was absolutely against it. And the rest of the team, you and Bert were too. And so we didn't join. But here's what happened. Here's how I see it now. That guy, that senator, was really looking for several things all at the same time. It was like a win-win-win for them, for him. And that was, he would have an inside track on the latest technology in satellite communications, which we were developing. We were a front runner. They would have had the inside track, so they could meet with us and say, hey, so how's it going? What are you guys doing? Oh, that's really good. I'm really proud of you. And at the same time, they could be making side bets in the financial world and make a killing based on the inside information that they learned from us. That's one piece. Another piece is they could be heroes. I'm talking about the senators in Congress could be heroes because they could say, how can we use this technology to further the government's agenda? And how would they know? Well, they'd have the inside track. And we would be paying them to do it.
Yeah.
So am I right, Andy, or am I imagining
this?
Yeah,
and what we were doing, we were taking government satellite technology that cost the government $140,000 per receiver and manufacturing it and selling it for $1,400 a receiver. We figured out how to do it at 1% of the cost. And this is the time when the big satellite antennas in the backyard were popping up. This was a 4 gigahertz communication range. Now you have the smaller dishes. And those smaller dishes were coming. We knew they were coming. We knew that there was a higher frequency satellite network that was being launched. And this was almost an invitation to play in that network at a cost. You want to pay, you can play. And this is what I was talking about, the covert way of taking, because the takers will find very sophisticated ways to get your money and control the business, control where you go, but it's at a cost. And these people are out there, and it's hard to see it coming. I mean, it's really hard.
Absolutely true. Andy, there's proof to what we're saying. I mean, literally, there's proof. You and I and Bert were on the cover of a satellite communications magazine. And the article was talking about us as a company, and then it went on to say that one of us, we were being interviewed by this magazine, by the publisher of the magazine. He was so interested in what we were doing that the publisher was at the convention. He was interviewing us about what we were up to. He was fascinated by, three guys in a loft, building this technology. And then there was a customer that wanted to talk to one of us. And so one of us left and met with the customer. And in the article it said, these guys are unbelievable. They're willing to leave an interview with this publication to help a customer. The publisher, do you remember that, Andy?
I do. I absolutely do. And he wrote that in the article.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Now, in that same publication, that same issue, inside the issue, and I won't mention the company's name, but if you think of little satellite dish antennas, that's what we're talking about, that company. That company was willing to pay to play in this lobby group. They were willing to pay the big dollars to join and become a member. And that company went from the middle of the magazine issue, where we were on the front cover, to number one in the satellite television market. Number one. Billions of dollars. And it just kind of shows that maybe we did the wrong thing, Andy. Maybe we should have said, is that all it's going to take? Just $25,000? Heck, we can do that. But we didn't. Because we didn't think it was right. We didn't think it was right to buy our way in, to pay to play. But what you're learning, class, is these are real lessons. We are not embellishing. These are things that I've resisted talking about for years and years and years. But it's time now. It's time that you know what the big forces are doing. Georgia, New Hampshire will be right with you, and right after this break. Andy Gibbs is with us. Andy Gibbs, GIBBS.com. Andy, I want to share something with you. There seems to be some interest in what we're talking about today, and I just took a look at TalkStreamLive.com. And we're listed on TalkStream Live, and it shows all the broadcasters who are on the air. It's measured on the internet how many people are listening, and they're ranked from top to bottom. And we're number 24 right this moment. So of all those who are listening to this broadcast, thank you very much, and thank you for being in class today, and thank you for making us number 24. So I just wanted to share that with you, Andy. So and I'm talking about nationally. So all the programs that are on the air right now that are measured by the internet, we're number 24. So there are people who are listening. And Andy, you're going to be with me next Friday, and we're going to talk some more about this. Georgia, New Hampshire. George is Andy. George is a USA Prepares instructor. He's been calling in for quite a while. Brilliant man. I love hearing him. Welcome, Georgia, New Hampshire. George, you there? Where did George go? I don't hear George. Okay, George. If
Ben,
are you there, George? Hey, George.
Can you hear me, Ben? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Hi, Ben, and hello, Andy. I just wanted to say two things quick. One thing is this industrial espionage. Remember the Japanese had a tactic. What they'd do, they'd have a delegation go in and visit a factory. Then they'd have a man that they'd know his exact measurements from height, breadth, width, and he would stand next to a machine. And he stood next to a man who had a factory machine that was the best factory, even today, I guess, the best packaging machine in the world. And he goes, they took a number of photographs, and then they bowed, and they left. Well, I guess within 6 months, less than a year, they had the exact duplicated machine, and they were flooding the market with it, violated all kinds of patent rights. And I heard the same story in a toy manufacturer. A friend of mine dated the girl, but I'll just say this. There was that movie, I'm sure you remember. Remember Tucker, the man in his dream, about that 1940s car?
1949.
Yes.
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 Right. And they said Francis Coppola, who
produced the project there, directed it, he said he was attracted to that thing about the man who had a car that was better than anything that Detroit put out. There was a senator involved, too, who approached him and whatnot. Yep. And the big boys in Detroit did not want his car to hit the market. Only 50 were made. I think 48 are still on the road. They found one recently in an Ohio barn that was $3 million. Now, I guess that's what they're guesstimating it to go for. But they said Francis Coppola was particularly impressed with this story because he tried to build a new movie studio, and he ran into much the same thing. So, like I say, you're in good company there, but I hate to say it, but, you know, it's too bad you couldn't have gone after those guys who stole your receiver.
Well, they're done. They're out of business. But let me address this the Japanese issue that you're talking about. I saw it firsthand. I mean, I was right next to the guy. Literally, we were at a convention. Andy, I don't know what you remember, but you can feel free to chime in. We were standing, and the Japanese, a couple guys in dark suits, Japanese for sure, came up, and one guy said, "Well, can you take the cover off? I'd really like to see what the inside looked like." So we took the cover off our receiver and put it right on the front, and then all of a sudden, from out of nowhere, comes another Japanese guy with a motorized 35mm camera. And he took so many pictures so quickly and then disappeared. Do you remember that, Andy? Did we lose Andy?
Yes, I was going to bring that up. That entire vision was coming back to George was talking about taking the pictures in front of the packaging machine. Exactly the same thing.
Exactly the same thing. So what we're saying is we were there. I was right next to the guy who stepped aside for just like a foot to let his buddy come in and take pictures of our latest design. Yes. And this was the previous design.
Japanese, huh?
Yeah. And Andy's going to be back, George. Andy's going to be back next Friday. We're going to talk some more about this.
All right.